Right, I say, fabulous. I do understand that we're going to have a quick microphone training while the chap's here. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Keith Blackwell. I represent Public Eye. We're the culprits that sold you this system, so if it goes wrong, blame anybody else but me. I'm joking. What I'm going to do is very quickly show you how this delegate unit works. It's going to take me about 30 seconds, although don't put me on a timer. Okay, so I'm going to turn this off at the moment. So that will be that one there. Somebody else just pressed their mic. Could you do that again, sir? Would you mind? Yeah. Okay, so you'll see your name come up on the delegate unit. You'll see that there's 2 mics there live now. If you now press a third mic, you'll notice it doesn't come on. So there's only 2 live mics onto the floor any one time. Chair obviously can go live at any time you like as well, or you can stay live, and the chair has the power to cut you off, of course. So, okay. One thing I would like to explain, which is slightly different to what you had before, this is a line array mic. It's a clever mic. It's been designed to pick up in various zones rather than actually like a gooseneck mic is, which is directional. In other words, it will pick up in just in like a tube cone type. So please don't try to lean into it because you don't need to. I know that may not be the case that you want to because you've been used to doing that. After a while, you'll get used to it. But it should pick you up at distance as well. Okay, so that's it. Simple as that. Thank you.
Just before you formally start the meeting, can I ask if we can now stand when speaking? I've never liked this sitting down, and I think it's much more formal, to be frank. If you're able to stand, that is, of course. But we always used to stand, and I'd like to see us go back to that for everybody who's able to.
I'll second that.
Councillor Brodie, I've made the executive decision that should people wish to stand, they can, providing that people can hear in the microphones clearly. So I think it's up to everybody. We did used to stand, and I quite liked it when we stood. Not that it made much difference to me if I stood, but it's personal preference, please. Okay, moving on, apologies for absence. Councillor Brian Tyndall, Councillor John Howe, Councillor Vanessa Churchman, who's stuck because she's on a boat and on a train was something or other, and Claire Millsdale will be leaving early. Thank you. Oh. Councillor Stevens.
You rattled through that, Chair, and I didn't catch. Shirley Smart is not here this evening as well, so she sends her apologies. Thank you.
Any other apologies? No, thank you. Can I remind everybody that tonight we're having a webcast and it's going to be recorded. So, yes, it's just so you all know. Thank you. Item 1 on the agenda is the minutes to approve as a correct record. Could somebody please propose? By Councillor Whitehouse, seconded by Councillor. Move on to item 2, which is declarations of interest.
Yeah.
Yep.
I wish to declare in relation to item 8, motion 1, I am a dog owner who is a member of my family.
Right, does that mean everyone that's a dog owner needs to put their hands up? Do you want everybody to put their hands up, can you say, or, you know?
You should ask.
Okay, is there anyone else that's a dog owner that would like to put their hand up? Okay, is anyone recording the names of these people? Okay, keep your hands up until oh, right, okay, yep, Councillor Brodie.
Yeah, I'd like to declare an interest in that. I am a Newport Parish Councillor and Chair of that council, and item 6 is primarily motivated by me from Newport Parish Council. Thank you.
Councillor Jones-Evan, Councillor Garrett and Councillor Price, I presume it's all the same.
Ditto,
yep.
And Vice Chairman of that same council.
Thank you.
Newport Parish Councillor and Councillor for Carisbrooke.
I will remind everyone that item... Oh, hang on, Councillor Baker-Smith.
It was only a question in relation to the special responsibility allowance paper, whether we're all exempt.
Yep, special dispensation has been given for that item for all members, okay? Thank you. And I declare an interest in the, I know Max Morrison that's on that board, just personal interest. Okay, moving on to item number 3, which is to deal with questions from members of the public. The first one to come through, where's the written ones? Written question. First one up is Sylvia May of Tottenham, please.
Okay, thank you very much for allowing me this question. On Saturday, Frack-free Isle of Wight spent 3 hours in Newport asking the public to ask their local member to oppose the government's adoption of fracking as both PD, permitted development, and as part of the NSIP regime. But many felt that the majority of council would not care anyway, would not listen, or would simply toe the Conservative Party line. That's not my feeling, but that is what came back. So my question is, in view of this, can I ask the council if they will report in the county press as soon as possible the outcome of today's deliberation, to inform the public as a matter of urgency, and whatever the outcome, could they please highlight for the community their right to respond to the consultation on permitted development until October the 25th? Thank you.
Councillor Abraham, would you like to respond, please?
Thank you, Chairman. And for Jeff, I will stand because I believe it is the right thing to do at full council. Please be assured that the outcome of the discussions on the motions will be published as soon as possible by our Democratic Services team. And I know we can also rely on the media, and I include all media, whether it's on the White, County Press, Island Observer, Island Echo. I believe they all will publish the outcome of the decisions tonight. To also provide profile of the outcome of the debate and the ongoing consultation connected to the issue. All those concerned about the issues should be assured that the Council does take care about the need to ensure decision making on issues affecting the island take place on the island, and discussions of the motions by the full Council reflects this in this case.
Is there a supplementary? Thank you very much for your time. Next written question is from Councillor David Jones. Is David here? No? No one's around. Okay. So we'll send a written response to Councillor David Jones's question. So first up, Tanya Rebel, with your oral question. Are you here? Oh yeah, there you are.
Thank you, Chair. Can you all hear me? Yeah? Wonders of technology. My question is, will this council finally declare the island frack, accidation, drill, whatever you want to call it, free? As a strong symbolic message to government, and also as a strong message to any unscrupulous industry who would like to frack out of the island.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart's going to respond.
So, Tanya, can you hear me okay? I wasn't going to stand because I'm already a little bit high and I don't want to be up too high today, but that's good to hear. Okay, so your question is about whether or not we would declare the island fact-free. I think you'll find during the course of the motion that is on the agenda tonight, we will deal with our view in relation to the government's position, and the more comprehensive picture around being frack-free or otherwise is something which this administration will then deal with in due course. But I do thank you for your question.
Supplementary? No? Yes?
So does that mean that when the industry is knocking on the door, and it might well be tomorrow, this council will stand strong and have a spine?
I can certainly assure you that this council under this administration will stand strong in a range of areas.
Second question from Cameron Palin, East Cows. Cam, thank you.
Thank you. Does the administration support oil drilling on the Isle of Wight?
Cameron, I don't think this administration has had the need at this point in time to consider that in great detail. It's a little bit like the previous question. However, it is something we will need to explore, both in terms of whether it's appropriate for the island. What I can assure you and anybody else listening is that we all in this chamber, I look across the chamber, are absolutely determined to preserve the uniqueness of this island, be it our fantastic areas of outstanding natural beauty, be it our economic environment, be it just the place that people love to come here, grow up, live and work. So if that answers your question, that's where we stand.
Is there anyone else that wishes to ask a question? Councillor, oh sorry, Bob Blizzard, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Bob Blizzard, resident of Sandown. In welcoming the absolutely excellent report of the Local Government Boundary Commission in terms of the Isle of Wight, what plans does the Council have once the review is concluded for carrying out a parish review, as happened fairly shortly after the last ward review of the island?
Councillor Stewart.
Well, first of all, thank you for your question, Mr. Blizzard. I won't call you councillor, although you did a very good job while you were in council. We certainly are pleased to see the boundary review come forward, I'm not sure every member in this chamber supports every proposal in it, and I'm sure various people, and certainly Councillor Whitehouse, who's been working very thoroughly on this on our behalf, will be making sure that the government get good feedback. Apart from the actual boundary changes, which will affect local town and parish councils, I think there's also some name changes that we need to look at, and I sense in some cases perhaps the Boundary Commission didn't appreciate the full nuances of areas of the island, so we'll be dealing with that. In the longer term, I think we will need to look at the impact on town and parish councils, but I am pleased to report that the early indications are that the work we're undertaking to go out on the road and meet town and parish council is helping to build a really good relationship, and certainly we will continue that.
Okay, moving on. Item number 4, Chairman's official announcements. That's paper B. No questions? No, thank you. Moving on then to item number 5, which is Leaders' Update and Report, 20 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members will be pleased to know that although it's a rather comprehensive report, totalling 7 pages in all, it's not my intention to reread it to you all. I know that it's been circulated. I'm sure members will have some interesting questions to ask. I will highlight a couple of things. What was the intention here is to give council members a broad breadth of opportunities to understand where we're going. I would highlight in the introduction that this administration is absolutely focused on securing our financial sustainability. We know already that there are a number of councils now, and they're listed in the very first page of the report, who are already suffering and challenging real issues, and we're not in that place at this time, and it's our intention that we will not be there. On page 2, in relation to the budget, I would just outline that we are very near to the stage of getting a picture of the options that we want to consider. I want to actually thank Newport Town Council, because they were a good example to us last night of a very positive mindset they've got in relation to the whole of Newport. So I think I need to recognise that, and we did say at that meeting that we would aim to have an outline for consideration of options in November. Moving down further on, you'll see one public service. I would just like to thank Ian Lloyd and the staff who have been working very hard on the plan for improving downstairs so that there is multi-agency access from across the road, AIDS UK, a whole range of people. I think you're going to see a very different front office, and I would encourage the media to come along once that is opened, because it's really going to look impressive, and I think most importantly it'll give the public what they need, a one-stop shop. Just in page 3, digital technology, we are now working closely with a number of digital organisations, one international, to really understand what data sharing across the local authority and health will be, and I hope to give you some further interesting news on that in due course. Just an observation on the ferry fares, which I can tell from the media received a mixed reception from different people. I think the good news to say is that we've managed to get something positive from the ferry companies who are willing and able to do that. We are then continuing, and this is important to understand, to look at the impact of any acute service review and how we can help those people that have to travel at no choice of their own due to illness to the mainland for the best care they can get. And we certainly are very forward with that, and as soon as those details are coming out, and I will probably look to Councillor Mosdell to announce that when it's ready. And thirdly, also, all the other people, and everybody's hard working on the island. I've seen a lot of the comments from people who are hard working and don't fit the previous 2 categories, and be in no doubt we are determined to work with our ferry companies to get the best deal we can for islanders. So this is just the start of a journey. We're getting a positive response at the moment, and in due course I hope we can announce some further good news. On the island plan review, I just need to highlight that the report says it should be launched in October. Councillor Abrahams rightly points out to me that one of the areas we need to address is air quality and the European legislation, because at this time we remain under the wing of European legislation, which probably means that that report may not come out for consultation until November, but I think it's right and proper that we consider air quality, albeit I think myself and the Southampton Council leader are likely to have some healthy discussions about the impact of his clean air policy on the Isle of Wight and its overall economy. But I have been in communication with Southampton, and we're looking for a meeting. I've written to him. I've also written to Michael Gove to express the importance of looking after our island economy at this difficult time, but that doesn't mean that we don't support the policy to protect our environment. Finally, in the concluding remarks, I am really pleased to report a full and active level of progress being overseen by this Conservative administration. I am reassured the Council remains on track to deliver its corporate plan objectives. And finally, I wish to personally welcome the appointment of our new Assistant Chief Executive, Wendy Pereira, who is key to the focus of what we're doing. She has got target areas around commercialisation, digitalisation, and probably for me, the most important is tackling our housing issues on the island, particularly for our young people, the affordable housing and the inevitable extra care housing that we are going to need, and we know it's coming. So congratulations to Wendy, and I look forward to working with her, and I've already been doing so. The senior management team is now well placed to deliver on the goals and targets we set with the support of scrutiny, and I'm grateful to Andrew Garrett for his approach to this, which has been very structured, very professional, and at times very challenging, but that's why it should be with scrutiny. And through my leaders report in the coming months, I will hope to give you more news. And I'm happy to take questions.
You just made that, look, red light. Councillor Brodie.
Right, Chair, I'll stand up for this one, start to get it going. Barry is the first one, but I'll follow him. I'd like to refer to the Clean Air Zone section of your report, if you don't mind, Leader. I hear what you say about what you're doing so far, but given, I mean, I'm pleased that you support government policy with regard to clean air policy, and I think any government would be pursuing that, whether we're in the EU or not in the EU in the future. But what I'm puzzled at is that the government has instructed certain councils, including Southampton, to deal with the issue of pollution, and we, as a local authority, have pretty much condemned the measures that they're trying to put in place. Now, I understand why you do that, but I'm just interested if the administration has any alternatives that they would be able to suggest to Southampton City Council, given that in the future, probably not in the very near future, but given that in the future we could be facing similar instructions from government in the county town, for instance. Pollution levels in this town are pretty notable, though not at the level of, say, London or Southampton or Derby. But it is something that will be facing local authority, this local authority in the future. So I would be interested if you have any alternative suggestions, because I'm sure the leader of Southampton City Council would be very interested in understanding from a Conservative council precisely what they would do when they're under instruction from a Conservative government. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Brodie. You're absolutely right to highlight this. I picked up on it early because the consequences for the island, if they were left to go through in the way that they are quite significant. 20% of Red Funnel Ferry's current freight would not meet the target level of a Euro 6 area. Now, interestingly, I was speaking to a local haulier last night, and he said inevitably it will come, and actually he's already gearing up his new vehicles to meet the target. The problem is some people that come to the island and some of those coaches from other parts of the country just do not meet the target. So there is a short-term risk for us. I think the second thing is that the targets that Southampton need to meet are not very far away from where they need to be. And I suspect if I was in Southampton as a business, I probably would be quite concerned whether it's the ferry port, the continental cruise ships, and others about how this is going to impact on my business. And those are the areas that I intend to discuss with the leader at Southampton. I think we would probably need some form of access zone to ensure that we can get through, because if this is enforced, and I don't know if people are aware, we're talking about £100 per vehicle, not cars, but little trucks. I suspect that's going to deflect them off to Lymington and or to Portsmouth, because that's going to be the way people make their business case for their business. So I think there's also opportunity for some degree of exemption. And I think we need to be clear, and this is what I want to speak to Government about, exactly what the timeframes and target levels are, because Southampton are coming in quite abruptly, as you say, but actually there may be a bit more time than they're saying, because my understanding is there is 2 or 3 more years than they've suggested, and it may be that they will actually reach their target without having to put this rather domineering approach on. So I think my approach is going to be find out the facts, identify what is going to be crucial to our businesses, and then see what we can negotiate with Southampton. I don't for 1 minute think this is driven by money, but clearly there's an income. And the other thing, of course, for the island is we're very keen to go electric. and move into that zone, which will take the diesel off the planet anyway. So I think there's some positive long-term things, but you're absolutely right. I need to think about the island's position and how we protect our interests, both in terms of the environment and also our economy, because it is so crucial to jobs over here. But thank you for your question.
Okay, before I take the next one, can I please remind you, we've only got 15 minutes and we've already used up almost 7 minutes already. So could you please be quick and with your response, Councillor Stewart, and with the question. Councillor Hastings.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, regarding the planning and housing section of the report, Leader, can you tell us what is being done, if anything, about empty properties across the island that have been given planning permission but remain unfinished for many years and often derelict and an environmental hazard?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Hastings. I think there's one of the things that a lot of residents, and I'm sure members across the Chamber, have had frustration with, is these properties that appear to get planning permission and then just sit there for years with nothing happening. Some of them in a really derelict condition. I've had people talking about rats and rubbish and everything, and I just don't think the island accepts that. So we've been taking 2 approaches. First of all, in relation to properties where they're not moving forward and we think they should, and there's real opportunities to deal with that. Councillor Hutchinson is now actively pursuing the compulsory purchase order approach, and there are a number of premises that have come under that wing in order to move them on. But in addition, and I mean whether it's Brading, Ventnor or Bryston, it's a case of why should we allow that to happen? So there is a piece of legislation which I think Councillor Abraham may refer to later on his motion, where we can actually look at whether we should consider repealing that planning application. People get these planning permissions and they need to deal with it. What they don't need to do is blight our island with all the horrible state that some are in. And I know it's exceptions, but I think we have a duty to tackle that.
Councillor Michael Lilly.
In light of the government's announcement today to make £2 billion available to local authorities for social housing, is the Isle of Wight Council intending to meet all housing associations immediately to agree bidding so that significant social housing can be built on the island and provide relevant housing for the 2,000 people on the council waiting list?
What was the question? What was the question?
Basically, what is the council going to respond to the government's announcement?
I'm not trying to be obstructive, but I don't think that relates to something in the report, so I can't answer that. But you're welcome to hold on to it.
It does relate to the report, because in your island plan review side, you talk about social housing and the need, and that is relevant to that. Right?
I'll invite the chair to rule on that one, but I can't see the word social housing in there. Maybe I'm misreading it.
It basically says we're providing housing for our local community, right? And it was accepted by the report that was done by councillors, chaired by Tig Outlaw, that actually what we needed on the island was affordable and social housing for families on this island.
Okay, if I give it a bit of breadth on this one, 3 things. One, you're absolutely right. Councillor Outlaw and the committee that he delivered that to has presented an excellent report on affordable housing. I can absolutely tell you that I'm going to make sure that our officers are applying for that fund, which you're right was announced. I think it was 2 billion, wasn't it? Whether the Isle of Wight will get too much of it, I don't know. But in addition to that, we are very much focused on extra care housing and affordable housing. I don't know where we're meeting with all the developers, because that may not be the best approach, because we've got some that are interested and some that aren't. But I think the 3 key things are, we've got a report that we accepted, we're going to look to deliver on that, and I will be approaching government ministers to see, through the officers, to see if we can get a bid in for some of that money.
Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. I shall refer to the budget management section of the Leader's report. Part of budget management and preparations, as it says there, initial budget preparations, will be the consideration of the local council tax support scheme. I see from the forward plan that will be dealt with at November's full council this year. I understand the support scheme, present work is being done, that the support scheme will not become less generous than it already is. What I seek from the Leader is a commitment that that is indeed the case, and furthermore that consideration is being made to actually restoring some of the provision to the local council tax support scheme, because of course that does affect the very poorest in our society who are struggling to make ends meet.
Okay, so as you know, last year we reduced the local council tax support scheme to, I think it was 75%. In our discussions so far, I would say that we're not going to rule anything in or rule anything out because we must set a lawful budget. That said, we've yet to have a conversation in that area. I'm just going to ask Councillor Hutchinson just to elaborate because I think he will give the information required.
Thank you, Leader. At the moment, there is no proposal to alter the scheme from the level that he's at. We do have to consult every year, but we are not proposing any reduction. It would be nice to think that we could increase the amount of support, but of course at the moment we are also wrestling with the need to make the £5.5 million cuts this year and for the next 2 years. But we have recognised that that fund has been reduced significantly, and that is why we have at this moment excluded it from any further changes. I would just remind members that we still have in place a scheme which is not financially capped to provide support for those people in extreme hardship, and a number of people have applied and been awarded help under that scheme.
Councillor Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chair. To pick up on a question that was asked a short while ago, would the leader agree with me that the proposal for the clean air zone in Southampton would be the equivalent of a cramp-on boot on the throat of the island's economy if we don't get it sorted? One of the problems of that is that it is the result of Gordon Brown's dash for diesel in the past. But would he confirm that we've already discussed a technological solution to this? Whitelink already has automated number plate recognition. There's no reason why Red Funnel couldn't have the same, which if we can get the government's agreement, we could get a waiver for trucks going through Southampton, which are then seen to board on the Red Funnel ferry and come to the island. So there's a very easy solution to this if the political will can exist.
Well, thank you for your question, Councillor Whitehouse. My short answer to that is yes. A slightly longer one is I think all those suggestions you've just made will form part of my discussions with the leader at Southampton. The margin is tight they're trying to reach. I understand where they're coming from, and I'm sure there are people in Southampton who would love to see that air zone improved. There are ways in which we can exempt ourselves, as you say, using technology. I think it's about them understanding the real impact this could have on our island jobs and businesses, which is why I made my statement early on, and I can assure you the MP and I are working very closely on this in the best interest of the island.
Councillor Baker-Smith.
In relation to the clean air zone, is the leader aware that there are higher than average reports of higher than average rates of cardiovascular disease and respiratory disease in the north of the island, particularly in my ward of Whipple and Osborne and in East Cowes, and that's in the past been directly linked to the Fawley oil refinery, which can be seen of an evening glowing with the fire coming out of the top of the chimneys. That was linked by an eminent toxicologist who sadly is no longer with us, Dr. Van Steenis, who had advised government, and I would therefore ask whether the leader would be willing to discuss the impact of Fawley oil refinery on the north of the island when discussing the overall clean air zone.
Yeah, so the first part of your question, no, I wasn't aware of that full information. I would be really grateful if you could share that with me sooner rather than later so that when I go over to Southampton, we can take it into account. You're absolutely right. I mean, I think we're very lucky here on the island. We don't have high levels of pollution all over the place created by ourselves, and we want it to stay that way. But there are very big areas around us, and Fawley may be one that's confirmed by what you've just said. And I think we need to bring that into focus. There are much bigger areas where Southampton could hit its targets and help us all. So I'm very happy to speak about that with you outside, and I thank you for raising that point.
Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. I am actually in agreement with the leader about the fact that the consultation exercise on the Combined Fire Authority is indeed a very important piece of work. Now, I appreciate that the consultation isn't due to close until the 26th of October, but I have been asking for some time for a members' briefing, or at the very least a briefing for scrutiny members, from the fire service managers for balance. As a scrutiny member, I've heard and spoken to a lot of firefighters on the ground. Sadly, as people will know from the incident that we had in my ward in Sandown. But I've heard very, very little from the managers, and I think that the Combined Fire Authority matter comes back before scrutiny on October the 11th, and I would very much appreciate a members' briefing. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Thank you for pointing out what is a really important area. I can reassure you and any other member, I'm sure if they have spoken to their local fire staff, they'll know that Councillor Outlaw has been unrelenting in his efforts to engage with fire officers and fire staff as this consultation. He has a very clear picture right down to the roots, and I'll thank him for the work I know he's putting into that. I would probably suggest to you that you'll need to speak to Councillor Garrett as the Chair of Scrutiny as to whether he wants to put that on the work plan as an item, and he'll prioritise it, and I can see him confirming that. Thank you.
Sorry to those members that had their hands up, but we are now out of time. Sorry. We'll move on to item number 6, which is Parish of Newport, change of name. Who's leading on this one? Oh, Stuart Hutchinson.
Thank you, Chairman. This one is pretty straightforward. It's a request of Newport Parish Council to agree a change of name. That has to be done by resolution of full council here. It's pretty straightforward, and if members are minded to agree the recommendation, then that name will be changed.
Councillor Brodie. Reid needs a second, sorry.
I'll second it.
Councillor Brodie.
Thank you, Chair. I will second the motion. I'm a Newport Isle of Wight councillor, and I'm lucky enough to be in my second time as Chair of Newport Parish Council, having been the original one 10.5 years ago. Hopefully this is uncontentious, but I'd just like to take an opportunity to say a few things about why we brought this forward. Firstly, can I just stress that we're not a town council and have no intention of being a town council. People constantly refer to it as that. I regularly get questions, why aren't you the mayor, Jeff? I mean, I led a no mayor campaign many years ago in a referendum on the Isle of Wight to get rid of a directly elected mayor for the Isle of Wight. And I have no intention of ever having a mayor in Newport if I can help it. The reason we're not a town council, is if you look geographically at the areas we cover, it is probably about 75 to 80% rural rather than urban. If you looked at a map of Ryde, it is around about 95% urban, which is why they're a town council. We took the decision originally to be a parish council, and we remain a parish council, and nobody's ever suggested that we change that. Historically, we never wanted emparishment in Newport, and I don't think they wanted it in Ryde either. We didn't have parish councils until, or town councils until 2008. The then Isle of Wight Council encouraged us to do so. I'll use that word advisedly. I could use a stronger word, but we're advised to do so. I, along with Councillor Smart, who's not here this evening, and a few other people, ensured that we got the required signatures for a parish council so there would be no taxation of Newport residents without representation. At the same time, John Hobart's predecessor in Carisbrooke Village, then Councillor Barbara Foster, also organised a petition for a separate Carisbrooke Parish Council. And he came to full council, and I was a member of this council then, probably, well, John was still here then, but he was representing Gurnard then. But it came here, and it went, the Isle of Wight Council supported Newport and Carisbrooke together under the name Newport Parish Council. That went off to government supported it, and we were created. And I think we've been pretty successful, albeit we've been very cautious about how we've progressed over the years that we've been in existence. However, it became, as we arrived at our 10th anniversary in May, I began to think about the name, which I'd parked for a long time, back in 2008, because Carisbrooke is the historic centre of the Isle of Wight. We have a castle there. It is the very heartbeat of the original Isle of Wight population. The capital moved in down Carisbrooke Road, I suppose now. It wasn't there then, of course, to Newport, but Carisbrooke is an important part. And although only 1/7 of the population of the Carisbrooke ward lives in the parish council, within the parish, I did decide to bring a proposal to the parish council meeting that we change our name to Newport and Carisbrooke. So that's the reasons we're here. If you would just bear with me, Chair, and I'll quickly wrap up. The only opposition we've had to this, and I think it's one person, was the cost of it. That was something that was considered by Newport Parish Council when I proposed it at our annual meeting back in May. It's built into our accounts. I would say to you, we were created the same day as Ryde Town Council. Their budget is now over £1 million. Newport's is less than 400,000. Who are the spendthrifts and whose finance lead is Mr. Scrooge, Councillor Jeff Brodie? You have no need to worry about me spending the parish money inappropriately. I hope you'll pass this overwhelmingly. Thank you.
Councillor Jones-Evans, Julie.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to say that our chair of the parish council, although not born in Newport, has done a fantastic job of putting this motion towards you, and I hope that maybe our Carisbrooke member will say some words. But for me, it was a fitting way of marking our 10th anniversary as being a parish council and as showing the breadth and the inclusiveness of what we're about in Newport. So thank you. I hope you'll support the motion.
Councillor Hobart, did you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm fully support the Carisbrooke and Newport Parish Council. All our parish councils agreed with it. It's one of the oldest settlements on the island, and at one time one of the biggest church parishes, certainly on the island. It was also a parish that my own grandfather was a councillor in, just after the First World War. So it's very dear to me, and it's an area I've lived in all my life and went to school, my early schooling in. So to have it recognised and not being subsumed under Newport Parish Council any longer, it is excellent, and I fully support it.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, being one that's been involved in developing historic and cultural walks for various locations around the island, and just winding up on a Newport one with Councillor Brodie's assistance, I think this is a very fitting proposal, as it truly reflects the history and culture of this particular area of the Isle of Wight. Thank you.
No one wishing to speak, so we move to the vote, please. All those in favour? Are there any against? Any abstentions? Woohoo! So we move on to item number 7, which I'll remind you we've got dispensation to speak, and that is the report of the Independent Remuneration Panel. And Councillor Hutchinson, I believe you are going to introduce this paper, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd simply introduce this because this is one of the elements that falls within my portfolio. It is, of course, the independent report of the Remuneration Panel. I would like to thank Michael Anderson and his team for doing their usual very thorough and excellent piece of work. I'll also comment that unlike in previous years where the panel has been given levels of direction from the administration, we have taken the view that it should be utterly independent. Their choice of changes is up to them. And the last comment that I will make before I turn over to the Chairman is that although there is an increase, a slight increase recommended in members' allowances, I will point out that this is still less than members were getting 3.5 years ago. Thank you, Chairman. I'll pass over to the Chairman of the panel.
Is there anyone wishing to speak? Sorry, we need a second.
I'll second it, Chair, but I'll reserve my rights.
Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. While I don't want to dilute the work of the Independent Remuneration Panel, I must make it clear that I'm an employer of 20 people, and I'm not in a position to offer my staff an annual increase of any description, and for that reason I can't support this, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Councillor Mosdale.
Thank you. I'm probably going to go against what most people think about this, but you know, I'm going to have my say. I would like to have more women in this chamber and more women in politics. I don't actually think this is enough money to give the level of commitment that is required to be a councillor. I would like to see more Labour, more Conservative. You know, we're a democracy. I know for myself to do this job is a huge level of commitment. I'm lucky I run my own business as well, but my life to do this is a huge juggling act. And quite often when I get home and I've done sometimes a 60-hour week as a cabinet member, my partner does say to me, seriously, when you were working in your other job, you were earning 6 times the money that you do for that and you didn't have the grief. So if you were going from any party and went up to somebody and said, I'd like you to stand to be a county councillor, you'd get to that part of the conversation, you know, you've got the level of commitment, you've got the people who want to make the change, and then you tell them how much they're going to get, and they work out the level of commitment that they have got to give. I'm sorry, but I will be voting for this because I think it's in the right direction. But really, it's not there. And I know it will be in the press that, you know, we're giving a 2% pay rise. But when I was working within the private sector, I would knock on the MD's door and say, I need a pay rise because I am worth this and I am doing this. You know, so that's the way that I work. I'm sorry, but I want to encourage more women into politics. And I think with this level of allowance, it's never going to change.
Councillor Lilly.
I'm going to vote against it, although I very much have empathy with what Councillor Mosdale has said. And the reason why I'm voting against the change really is out of principle. I have a food bank in my ward. I have many residents, not to the level of residents of perhaps in Councillor Brodie's ward, who are living still in austerity and poverty. And I cannot, from a moral and ethical point of view, agree to any increase at all. Although I do, going back to what Claire Mosdale said, is we do need to look at how we get more women, younger people, and probably less 61-year-olds like myself, males, in that. So I would like that change, but on this particular time of poverty on the Isle of Wight, I cannot morally and ethically support it.
List Councillor Baker-Smith.
It's always very difficult and awkward talking about allowances, and I'm actually in agreement with Councillor Mosdale and with Councillor Lilly. I have a food bank in my ward, and it's lucky I do, because since I've been a councillor with 2 children on £7,000 a year, I've had to use it. If you're going to have a diversity within this chamber, if you're going to see faces under the age of 60 as you look around this room, if you're going to see faces that aren't white as you look around this room, and if you're going to see female faces as you look around this room, then there ought to be a level of remuneration that at least allows people to step forward and do the job. Otherwise, you will continue to have retired male councillors who are of wealth and maybe haven't had the same experiences as a mid-30s female or a 25-year-old BME man. And I think it's incredibly important that we increase diversity within this chamber, as Councillor Morsdale has said.
Councillor Adrian Axford.
I'd just like to make a small point, which is to do with the amount of allowances that people can claim. There has been some fairly wild reporting in websites on the island about how much the leader can earn, for example. And I would like to make it clear that each councillor has a basic allowance and then can claim one more allowance. They can't rack it all up and have lots and lots. So please, when you're making your calculations, members of the press over there, please make sure that you follow the rules. So it's one basic allowance plus one other allowance, not a multitude of them.
Councillor Carlove.
Thank you. I totally support Councillor Morsdale 100% in what you've said. I came in as a new member recently and I am finding it incredibly financially difficult to function, and I work 50 hours a week easily sometimes to fulfil this. Let's bring this down a little bit. This 2% rise to me represents £2.36 a week, which is not even a coffee. Okay, so let's put it into perspective, because that's not 2% on 30,000, that's 2% on 7,000. And it's £154 a year increase. And whilst I have great respect for what he said in terms of some people not being given salary increases, I seriously had to consider my position at one point about whether if I could afford to continue. And if we do want the quality and level of people, I would actually be saying that really there needs to be a serious look across the whole of the United Kingdom about professionalising to a degree what it is that we do here in this chamber, because it's not sustainable, because otherwise you do end up with what some people think is an elite, which is not necessarily always the case, because there are some people who make great sacrifices and I can see them. But in the media, it doesn't look good when we award ourselves this money. We have a independent review panel who we should respect. There's no point in having them if we're not going to follow their recommendations, and so I will be supporting this.
Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Chairman. I hope everybody can hear me with this new microphone. I'm a bit scared, actually, because I don't want to come across as being too loud. One of the things that I'm seeing more and more significantly is the amount of working people on low incomes. We've heard about people visiting food banks. We know of the difficulty that residents are suffering with falling incomes while standards of living are going up. For me, it would be very, very difficult to support an increase in members' allowances while this is going on. But then again, I've never supported increases in members' allowances anyway, so there's no difference there. I think one of the things we also have to reflect as well as the Isle of Wight Council is the work of our town and parish councils. Our town and parish councillors work voluntarily. Some of them work a huge amount of time and hours to support our communities. And I'm very, very proud to say that I work shoulder to shoulder with my town and parish councils. I think it's very frustrating, and I think one of the things you see is that their responsibilities are increasing and they get no remuneration at all. For that reason, I will not be supporting the 2% increase in members' allowances and hope that others will join me. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Councillor Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd pick up on the point that Councillor Axford raised, which was there was a fake news story on the Island Bile site earlier, wrongly calculating the leaders' allowances. I see it's now been taken down. And that's good, but editorially it shouldn't have got there in the first place. It's a disgraceful little site. Anyway, moving on from that, I would endorse what Councillors Love, Baker-Smith and Mosdell have said in particular about this proposal. I think it's scurrilously inadequate, actually, for some of the people who are on lower incomes for whatever reason and want to participate. I would also observe that it's actually lower than inflation. So not only is it in actual terms lower than what the figure was 3.5 years ago or whatever, it's certainly considerably lower in real terms. Now, I make these points. I'm going to make a number of observations, not virtue signalling, but I want to make it clear I have no interest in this personally whatsoever. As officers will know, and the local media have published, I've never claimed a penny in expenses for my council work. I've declined a special responsibility allowance for my work as Cabinet Secretary, and I give my basic allowance away to charity because I'm able to afford to do that. But I wanted somebody who doesn't benefit from this, doesn't need the allowances, to speak up for those who do, because I've seen the commitment that Councillor Baker-Smith, for example, has put in with a young family, and I know that it's a struggle, and I disagree with virtually everything she espouses, believes in, and argues about. But by God, we're a better council for having women who can do that and come here and speak up. So those are my main points. I will be supporting it, not out of vested self-interest, but because I believe in inclusive democracy on the island.
Councillor Brodie.
Thank you, Chair. It occurs to me that the keyboard warriors of the Isle of Wight, the ones who never put themselves forward for election or to be members of the independent remuneration panel or whatever, who like to slate us and condemn us as incompetent fools, etc. If they'd been around at the beginning of the 19th century, we would never ever had a Labour Party in this country. Now I actually don't think you would want that. You wouldn't want it. Because the Labour Party was the working man's and woman, well, it was mainly men at that time, the party of the working man. And they couldn't afford to go to Parliament. And it was only by, I remember in my sixth form studies of English history, the debates in the House of Commons and the House of Lords about bringing in payment for MPs. And some of the statements that were made by the Tory Graph and the Times and all of the rest of them at that time were very much like the keyboard warriors that, we read, when we have to engage occasionally with social media. The Independent Remuneration Panel does a job that anybody can apply to be part of. I wish more people would do so. Again, it's white, sorry, I presume you're the chair, white, middle-aged men, from what I can see. I may be making a supposition there, but I suspect they are. I know they struggle to fill the places on it, and yet the keyboard warriors aren't rushing to do it. Now, I have always taken a view that I either support the panel's recommendation or I abstain. I would prefer the decision to be taken out of our hands. I would challenge any keyboard warrior to spend a month with me, an opposition member, who has no special responsibility, and see what I actually do in an actual month. I would challenge them to have spent a month with me when I was also chair of scrutiny on 2 occasions, when my weeks were 60-hour weeks, just like a cabinet member. I have to work damned hard in my ward, the most deprived ward on the Isle of Wight. I had to work damned hard as chair of scrutiny. I'm currently chair of Newport Parish Council, which has effectively become a major job for me in recent months because we're progressing so far. I give a lot of time. I will vote in favour of this. I know in recent years I've abstained, but I've been convinced by Councillors Baker-Smith and Mosdell, and Councillor Whitehouse, we're agreeing again, Chris. It's a bit of a worry, but I'm not joining the Tory party, ever. But I totally agree with them. If we are going to broaden the diversity of this council, we need reasonable allowances to compensate people who don't have significant private resources or are pensioners. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Abraham Barry.
Thank you, Chairman. I fully support everything that Jeff has just said. I think he's summed it up. And the thing is, you can be almost put off by some of those comments, the keyboard warriors, as Jeff calls them, and be afraid of of those, and that it's easy to say we're not going to take the money. Very easy. But people like Julia, I think she made some excellent comments, and I don't know her very, very well. I don't think we've ever really spoken. But if you've got young children and you're haven't got any work, then you do need to be paid sufficiently to be able to work in this chamber. It is absolutely critically important, but crucial, that we actually have mothers, we have people with disabilities that come in, different ethnic groups that actually could, and we have had people would remember Cliff Huggins, who was black. He was a Tory councillor. I think he took a lot of flack at the time. But we do need people like that to come forward and be able to sit in here and actually make the decisions that affect the Isle of Wight. I hear what Paul says about parish councils. Well, I'm a parish council, but there's no comparison in the decisions that we have to make as county councillor or Isle of Wight councillors opposed to the parish councils. The workload is tremendous, and I really feel that a 2% increase isn't a huge amount. It probably won't make a difference to a lot of people like myself. Yeah, I'm 61, so I'm one of the ancient old white people that helped make the decision. But when I first started in this council, I was just over 29. So I've actually have served in here for a long time. When I stood down in 2013, never expecting to return, and come back last year, I just forgotten what the work rate actually was and what you have to put into it. It's easy to stand outside and criticise, and I really would like to see some of those people, who hide behind these pseudonyms, actually to come forward and just put their names forward. If you can do better, I'm quite happy to have somebody from the Labour Party, from the Greens, Independents. We just need more people to be actually prepared to do that, and to have more people from those different backgrounds is critically important, in my opinion.
Councillor Andre, Debbie.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as one of 7 women in this chamber, I suppose, obviously, I'm going to support more diversity, and I challenge anybody not to want greater diversity in this chamber. I came in on the Be a Councillor and the Parliament Project initiatives. The Parliament Project very much wanting to encourage women to come in to all levels of government, right the way through from town and parish councils up to Parliament. But I'd like to highlight that this is an allowance, this is not a salary, and it's to cover travelling expenses. Now, maybe I'm in an unusual situation in the fact that I'm very fortunate, I don't have a mortgage and I own my property outright. I don't deny that my allowance contributes towards my income and therefore my disposable income, but I took all of that into consideration before standing for election. I work very long hours as a councillor, sometimes it seems like 24/7. But as long as I can manage my resources, I will continue to serve my residents in this way to the very best of my ability, irrespective of the allowance. I do agree with Councillor Brodie that this decision, I think, should not be taken by councillors, and I will be abstaining on this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Barry, Reg.
Gone on quite a lot, this, hasn't it? Yeah, I was surprised. When I first started, it was virtually voluntary. Nobody mentioned to me how much you'd get or anything else. That never came into it. When you was being selected, that was a long time ago. It wasn't until 2005 that the then Tories hiked it up. And ever since then, because I wasn't a councillor then, but when I got re-elected, I was really glad they hiked it up, because it was somewhere near being reasonable, and it's still reasonable now. I mean, if I drove a Bentley instead of a Renault Clio, I would probably say I don't need the money. But and that's that's the point I'd like to make. This isn't compulsory. All these people who are tearing themselves apart, oh, it's terrible, we've got to take this money. You haven't got to take it. If it hurts you too much, if it's like Paul, you're worried about working with parish councillors who aren't getting a sou, don't accept it. Be like the Bentley driving councillor over there. And, but I shall accept the 2%. I think they've done a good job. It's a thankless job. It's almost like being the independent member on the audit committee. Nobody wants to do it, but they've done it and they've done a good job. Absolutely. And I'll vote for it.
Was it Councillor Stewart?
Oh, you got Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just thank a couple of people? I thank Councillor Matthew Price for being as open, honest and transparent as he always is, and I think he represents a view, because I had that view expressed to me by people outside who are in business. But this is the only method by which, in the public sector, we can achieve any sort of allowance increase, and this is the process we use. I also agree with Councillor Brodie that I would actually like to see the independent remuneration panel completely independent, but I think they've done a very good job. I thank Councillor Axford for highlighting to one of the media outlets, at least, that actually the allowance I receive as leader is the only SRA that I take, in addition to my ward councillor allowance for doing my ward. I do not take the group leader's allowance, and neither do I take the allowance I could debate over, and I'm not going to, as the chair of the Police and Crime Panel, for two reasons. One, it's a role I have now but may not have in the future. Two, it actually helps the Police and Crime Panel to cover its small budget, and I can tell you it's very small, to hold the Police and Crime Commissioner to account, and we get the benefit of that both in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. So that's the clarity on that. I didn't contribute to the independent remuneration panel because I thought as leader of the council it's right and proper I stay impartial in a way. I would just point out to members one other aspect which may have not focused everybody's mind. It's on page E8 of the report. It deals with the SRA and how we look at things. Hitherto, the independent remuneration panel have reviewed the allowances and then looked backwards, and the effect of that could have been, and I thank those members who know about this, that we would have had members who are paying back money, let alone receiving allowance, and that isn't right. If you do a job and you know what your allowance is going forward, that's the right and proper way, and so with the assistants, and they know who they are, I'm grateful we've been able to deal with that issue, and I thank the independent remuneration panel, because effectively what this means now is the allowance you get, if it's a special responsibility allowance, you get that until the time you stop holding that special responsibility, which makes absolute sense to me. So on that point, I thank you. I shall most definitely be supporting the motion. I thank those for all their contribution, and I think sometimes it's healthy that we as councillors are seen to recognise where we are and what we're doing. So thank you all very much.
Councillor Hutchinson, do you want to sum up before I go to the vote, please?
I think everything that needs to be said has been said, Chairman. Thank you.
Move to the vote. All those in favour, please. Now, all those in favour, please show.
Councillor Abraham, Councillor Axford, Councillor Bertie, Councillor Beston, Councillor Brading, Councillor Chapman, Councillor
And those against, please. And any abstentions, please. That motion is carried. Can I thank the remuneration panel, and please feel free to leave if you'd like, and send all our best to Max, please. Okay, we move on to item number 8, which is motions submitted under Procedure Rule 9 of the Council's Constitution. Councillor Michael Lilly. It's your doggy motion.
I know, thank you. I'll sing How Much Is That Doggy in the Window. I know my learned colleague has been taking a lot of fun out of me for Councillor Brodie about this particular motion. But the motion came forward from an organisation called Birds Aware, which is actually responsible for the migrating birds across the Solent. And they recently did a consultation across the island and basically study about the fact. And one of the things that they basically said was that the Isle of Wight didn't have an overall dog walker strategy in place that actually would make it easier for protection of the migrating birds. And this was very relevant to me because I'm a councillor that includes Apley Beach, which is a tidal beach, which actually does have words. This was also in discussion with officers of this council who actually agreed that there did need to actually be a strategy. They were involved in those consultations. It's important to know that in the UK there's 8.5 million domestic dogs. And if you actually look at and put the maths, and I've worked out the maths, that basically 31% of households on the island have a dog. And in fact, 24% of that have more than one dog. I have a neighbour who has 5 dogs. It's therefore estimated that there could be over 30,000 domestic dogs on the Isle of Wight. If you actually look at the Tourism Isle of Wight website, it basically says we're a dog-friendly Isle of Wight. And in fact, the words are, we're one of the most generally dog-friendly places to visit with a massive variety of walks around our coastline, beaches to be sniffed, places to be explored, and acres of downlands to be scampered on. And in fact, talking to them today, they said that our economy is very much built on tourism with dog owners. And so there is an estimate that another 20,000 dogs come over in the year. So in the summer months, there's 50,000 dogs. That's a lot of fetuses, tons of it, right, within that. But there is actually no guidance for actually where dogs and actually could go. And that's why you have, recently I had to talk to dog owners and the football and various people on my beach about this. And they basically said there needed to be better signage and forward. And in fact, in the Solent SPA, through Birds Aware, the formula is to use leverage, things like Section 106 monies, to actually pay for this. So basically the strategy is to actually tackle things like dog poo, fouling, tackle the issue of dog worrying, and there's been some recent reports of livestock being actually bitten and things by dogs that are not being on leads, etc. And my particular point of coming here about the migration birds and other wildlife with that. So I want to put forward to the Cabinet to look seriously at a strategy that is dog friendly. I am a dog owner of a Westie called Muddy, and like Councillor Morell, I'm part of the Westie Whites, and regularly, we go forward, but we're responsible dog owners. We go on the lead, we go in areas which we do that, and that's what we want to do, because there's some irresponsible dog owners. 30% of my inquiries from my residents are about dog fouling. That is the big issue. I even get from Councillor Brodie about the dog fouling in Apley Park on a regular basis of that. So we do need a strategy. So I put forward this motion to the Cabinet to actually look seriously at something that is actually adopted by Hampshire County Council, and actually their figures are already reducing the level of incidences of dog worrying, reducing the worrying on wildlife disturbance, and reducing dog fouling. So it's a sensible thing for you to actually look at. I put forward the motion. Thank you.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Jones-Evans. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Jones-Evans?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy for the recommendation from Councillor Lilly to the Cabinet to look at this in more detail. I think everyone should be able to enjoy our open spaces safely. I recall many Sundays having to scour the Wootton Park before my son played rugby to remove certain deposits before it was safe for the children to play. So I think it is an issue, and as Newport Parish Council have taken over open spaces too, I think it's really important that they are safe spaces, and it's only a small minority that don't obviously look after their dogs and what they do. So I think we should move forward with this, and if we can take some lead from Hampshire County Council, then I think we should.
Councillor Whitehouse was next.
Yes, I'd like to propose an amendment, if I may, Chair. Nothing to do with the substance of the motion, but we shouldn't be passing... I can't get the image of Councillor Lilly going dogging in the lead up in my mind either. But here we are. Line 1, delete principal and insert principal so that we got the right word in there, because otherwise it's meaningless.
Councillor Lilly, do you accept that amendment?
Does it accept the amendment?
Chair, if it helps you out of a fix, I hadn't realised how lacking in sense of humour Councillor Lilly was. But if he is upset, the poor mite, I will of course apologise for any offence that was caused. In the meantime, can we move on and not have destructive points of order? I've moved an amendment. I'd like it put.
I accept your apology.
And the amendment? Just a spelling error.
I accept the amendment.
Okay, Councillor Rodney Downer.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to support Councillor Lilly. If it brings any decrease in the people that are not responsible with dogs, making it bad for the people that are responsible. In Wroxall Parish Council have put up loads of signs, also Godsall Parish Council, but in some cases it makes not one iota of difference. And so I know I said I was going to support it, but it's how would it be implemented, how would it be enforced, especially when money's tight. And that's all I need to say. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Tig Outlaw. Lily, Michael, can you just... Sorry.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Whilst I have had the misfortune to stand in a dog motion before, I've never had the opportunity to speak to one. But I'm afraid I would have to vote against this. What concerns me is that it's uncosted. We'd have the cost of the signage, which we already know the council is in a difficult financial situation. So a number of comments spring to mind. As Councillor Downer suggested, there are already signs in the streets saying no dog fouling, put your dog mess in a dog bin, and people still ignore it. So whilst the vast majority of dog owners are responsible,
I don't think any amount of signage is going to encourage those who are not responsible to do what they should. And Councillor Downer also made the point of enforcement. Again, who is going to enforce this? We would have the cost of that enforcement as well, so I'm afraid I'll have to vote against.
Councillor Baker-Smith.
Well, I think if I didn't support a motion for a strategy regarding dogs on the Isle of Wight, then Coco Bean would be very upset with me. So I will be supporting this evening. One of our regular walks is from the Folly Inn around through to Island Harbour, where Coco has to stay on a lead because it's a bird protection area. But one of the issues that we have there, and this is within my ward, is that there is a dinghy along that path that is now used as a dog waste bin, because I've been trying for a very long time to get a dog waste bin installed on that path, and that we now find that people deposit their waste bags in a dinghy along that path. Actually, Michael raised a very valid point. If we had a strategy, then we would be able to divert the funds from the SPA funding that comes from developers through to Section 106 to where it is supposed to go, and that is ensuring the safety of wild birds and animals around our coastline, and that means the proper disposal of dog waste and proper dog waste bins.
Thank you. Councillor Abraham Barry.
Thank you, Chairman. Like my colleague, Councillor Outlaw, I actually won't be supporting it. You know, we have loads of bylaws with dogs on beaches. Councillor Jones-Evans has said about Wootton Recreation Ground with rugby, and we've had the dog warden there on regular occasions, and nobody ever gets caught. We just don't have the people within the council that actually will enforce it. And if we adopt this, I just can't see that actually helping one iota. You know, it is easy to try and bounce the council into to spending more money without actually looking at what all the consequences are on it. I live adjacent to Firestone Copse, which a few years ago was a nice tranquil walk. You could walk through there, and it's now, quite frankly, become such full of dog mess, and people who take their dogs in there where you would expect to hear the birds singing and all the wildfowl actually on the old mill pond, and you don't see them anymore because of the amount of dogs that go in there and actually bark and create havoc for some of the wildlife that's in there. So, you know, we can put all the strategies in place that we like. I personally would like a strategy that could control McDonald's and all the food outlets that sell it to the public in little fancy cartons, and then they stop outside of your field gateway and then throw them out the window. But unfortunately, you can't do that. And I think to just try and have a strategy for a strategy's sake, I'm sorry, Michael, I just can't support it.
Okay, we still have 10 people wishing to speak. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chairman. I would actually like to support Councillor Lee in this. I am not a dog person. Those of you who know my partner will tell you categorically I am not a dog person. I am a cat person. However, in fact, I take exception to defecating and urinating in public places.
I'll do it again.
I'll try not to do it again. However, perhaps it is time for a different approach. And I read through Councillor Lilly's paper and his presentation, and thought to myself, well, maybe a softer, more friendly approach would be more effective than the draconian, you know, knocking the sign in the ground and what have you. I found it amusing is not the right word, but something made me sympathetic towards it, and I thought, actually, that could work. I think it could. However, I have the same concern about our council priorities. So, and I've told Michael this, although I would love to support him, we just have other priorities. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have discussed this enough, and with the other 9 people wishing to speak, we'll probably just go round in circles. So I'm quite happy that we move to the next vote as time is getting on. So if all those in favour that support the motion as amended, which was the principal thing, yeah. We're voting on the motion. Voting to support the motion. Councillor Whitehouse. Right. All those in favour, please. Those against. Any abstentions? Motion falls. Right, okay, we move on to the next motion, which is Councillor Hutchinson about the Boundary Commission.
Thank you, Chairman. This motion is put on the agenda really to give members the opportunity to comment in public on issues to do with the boundary review. The timescale that we have for any further representations to the Boundary Commission is extremely short, hence this appearing on tonight's agenda. The only other point that I would make is that obviously members can speak tonight, but tomorrow evening there is an opportunity for them to hear more about the review for those that are and need more information at the members' briefing. And comments will be taken both from tonight's debate and also from those that are made at the members' briefing to help us put together our response to the Boundary Commission. I'd also like to urge members to write to the officer responsible, which is Clive Joynes, and to Councillor Whitehouse, who is leading for me very ably on this review, so that we can make sure that all points of view are taken into account before we respond. Thank you, Chairman.
Could you just clarify, Councillor Hutchinson, have you agreed the amendment by Councillor Jeff Brodie, please?
Yes, Chairman, I'm very happy with that amendment.
Councillor Brodie?
Thank you. Yes, and I'm grateful to Councillor Hutchinson and Councillor Whitehouse for accepting.
On a very technical point of order, but we haven't seconded the motion yet. I second it and reserve the right to speak.
Well, I'm grateful to them for accepting my amendment regarding the Boundary Commission. I don't want to get obsessed with it tonight at all, because I think people can't get obsessed with the boundaries, not least myself, because it's the 4th one I've engaged with in my time on the Isle of Wight. And I think there's no doubt there are a number of members in this chamber who will be extremely disappointed, and Councillor Lilly who will be ecstatic, having comprehensively defeated the council's view regarding Ryde East, and he's staged a land grab on Wayne Whittle's ward, as far as I can see, but there we go. Anyway, setting that aside, I mean, the purpose of this is just to point out that we have 2 government quangos, which is effectively what these commissions are, that don't seem to talk to each other. The parliamentary boundary review, which is now finalised and with Westminster, decided, for some reasons, I can't see any logic to move certain areas from west to the proposed east constituency. This proposal will eventually be voted on by Parliament, but what it has left us with is proposals from the local government boundary review that would mean 2 wards would straddle the 2 constituencies. That would be the proposed Fairley and Whippingham ward, which Councillor Price would largely be representing parts of at the moment, and Councillor Baker-Smith a significant part of Whippingham, and also what I've called Greater God's Hill in the absence of an appropriate name, which parts of God's Hill is largely represented by, well, is represented by possibly the most popular councillor on the Isle of Wight, Rodney Downer, with his 83% or whatever he gets at elections. And it's been moved in with Arreton and various parts of Councillor Hastings' ward, which is slightly ironic since he's just moved from Bryston to Shorrell and no doubt will be moving back to Bryston in the very near future. But it does create an anomaly, I think, that you have 2 wards where the residents would be represented in one half by one MP and in the other half by another MP, and I think that's ludicrous personally, and actually goes against the guidelines to the Local Government Boundary Commission. So all I'm trying to do here is, I'm not seeking to instruct or anything, but at least let's not raise the white flag. Let's try and have a look at it, and I must admit it's not easy. Let's try and look at it, but if nothing else, at least make a strong protest to the Local Government Commission that they review that situation. They've got the skills, they've got the resources to do it. We haven't got it in-house to that extent. Clive's good, but he's one man. We haven't got that resource. But at least let's have a look at it. So I hope you'll support the amendment. And because I'm a saddo, I'll definitely turn up for the briefing tomorrow night and talk boundaries to your heart's content. Thank you, Chair.
We have a number of people wishing to speak. Councillor Meglen next.
Well, I think that's it. Just want to make 3 points really about this. I was quite stunned overall by the new map. I just couldn't recognise anything in it. And to me, the Boundary Commission is supposed to be working on Councillor Whitehouse will advise me on this, on local identity and sense of local identity. And I just can't understand where it fits in on that basis, on that criteria. What I think that we need to remind the Boundary Commission about is the fact that we are the only totally imparished county in England with our 33 local councils, and our ward boundaries and our parish boundaries are congruent. It all fits together, so we know which parish council we belong to, which we go to. And I'm thinking it's going to get extraordinarily complicated for voters when already they have post office codes which are often at variance with their local government identities. And then it's assigned also, then they've got their ward councillor representing a strangely named thing. We were discussing tonight the idea that people of Yarmouth would be in freshwater. It's kind of weird. The whole thing is really odd to look at. I just don't understand. For me, it was very deeply confusing. And then also the question about the parliamentary boundaries as well. We're really going to be very confusing our voters quite immensely by this solution if it goes that way. And I'd just like to point out, in terms of local identities, some of these boundaries go back a hell of a long way. The boundaries of most of us are actually defined in Doomsday Book, and you may remember I wrote a book about it, so I know a little bit about this. And some of the boundaries we have go back to the mother parish boundaries, which were set by St Wilfrid back in the 680s after the invasion of the Isle of Wight by the Kingdom of Wessex, when we were reintroduced to Christianity. And it's said that St Wilfrid, and there's a lot of archaeological evidence to support this, he based his boundaries on what he still had with Roman boundaries, because it actually fits in with the Iron Age settlement structures and the Roman settlement structures, that these were actually the imperial parishes. So we're talking about over 2,000 years of identity and boundaries and belonging, and I find this new map just has no relation to any of that at all, and it's completely confusing. Thank you.
We enjoyed that history lesson. Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Lilly.
I don't have an objection to the wording that's actually in the motion in front of us, because actually it's very clear that we get an actual Isle of Wight Council response. I don't have an issue with that. I did have an issue and voted against the proposal last time, and I am ecstatic to actually be vindicated that actually, in the words in the report, we were not persuaded by the evidence provided by the council to adopt their proposal for eastern area of Ryde. On our tour of the area, we considered that the boundaries proposed by Councillor Lilly to be logical, clear and identifiable. It also went on to say we have been persuaded by the evidence provided by Councillor Lilly to adopt his proposed Ryde East and Ryde South division, as we consider the divisions use clear boundaries and reflect the new and existing communities in the area. And taking Councillor Medland's point about identity, the proposals before were absolutely slicing the historic identity of Apley and Elmfield. And I am glad that I got up and had the guts with my residents to object and put that onto the website, and I'm glad that I have been vindicated for that. And in fact, the plan for Ryde is actually logical. It keeps all the wards other than the Fishbourne and Binstead and Fishbourne, which naturally go together, but it brings in a Ryde Southwest ward. It actually brings in a Ryde Central, so it's actually a sensible putting together, and it uses railway lines, it uses the main roads, and it uses the boundaries. So I will be putting forward to Councillor Whitehouse that I want to see in the report that actually the Ryde is the right put forward by the Commission is correct. Thank you.
We still have about 7 people wishing to speak. Councillor Rodney Downer.
Thank you, Chairman. Very quickly, I've pointed this out to a few people. I'll speak at the Members' Information Seminar tomorrow evening, and thank you very much for arranging that. Looking at the map, Wroxall with an H and Ventnor with only one N, and it patently says under on the map, Ventnor. Who's looking at what? Thank you.
Councillor Baker-Smith.
I wanted to thank Councillor Brodie for bringing this amendment this evening. This was a concern that I had also intended to raise, but he had the foresight to bring it as a pre-printed amendment, which I'm most grateful for. I'm pleased to see, as a result of the parliamentary constituency review, that East Cowes and Whippingham now sit in the east of the Wight. It seemed very strange to me that the central line, the Medina line, wouldn't be followed. However, as Councillor Brodie has quite rightly now raised, this will cause an issue with the split of Whippingham and Osborne, with Whippingham now sitting with Councillor Price's Fairlea ward, and that ward will in turn then be split down the middle from a parliamentary constituency point of view. So I would absolutely agree with Councillor Brodie that that would need looking at, and would ask that that is added to the submission.
Councillor Barry Reg.
Thank you. I don't have a lot of trouble with it, really. I think Councillor Lilly's on about Apley and Elmfield and being separate. One time I was the councillor for Seaview and Apley and Elmfield. I've been through all this before. After it's been in place a year or so, nobody takes any notice. The people who represent, as long as they can go to the same place vote, that's what they're worried about. They don't care that you're Apley and whatever. I don't really believe that people are that concerned about it. I feel sorry for the elections and land charges manager who put all the work in drawing our attempt to settle it up. I do. I think that's a shame. But at the end of the day, once you get to the election, who cares really? The people out there don't. As long as they get a vote and they get a councillor, that's all they're worried about. Because they won't go anywhere near the councillor till they're in trouble, or they want something done and they've got a planning application. They don't really care. I don't agree with just having two MPs. I think that's what we should be fighting. It's ridiculous having 2 MPs. Whether half of one's in one ward or the other, those who go to the wrong one will soon get shoved to the right one, like we do, don't we? People come up to me and say, "Oh, you're my," I say, "No, I ain't. Go and see him." It's, we all do it, and we all love doing it. So I don't see what you're worried about.
Councillor Andre, Debbie.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say that when we had the initial members' briefing about the boundary review, delivered both by Councillor Whitehouse and by Clive Joynes, I was actually very, very happy with the proposal that was put forward for my ward. When the actual submission proposal came forward, it bore absolutely no resemblance. And I'd like to remind councillors that I was the only other councillor, in addition to Councillor Lilly, that actually voted against it. Now, I have a question. How many hours of officer time was spent drawing up the submission that was put before us by Councillor Whitehouse? And how is it that these proposals that were put forward were so dramatically different to those that we've now received from the Boundary Commission? For example, a totally different 2-member ward, a coast-to-coast ward that we're now given on the West White, and significant changes to God's Hill. Thank you.
Councillor Outlaw, Tig.
Thank you, Chair. It was my understanding that the Boundary Commission would be considering local identity, and I've got to admit I'm not just disappointed, I'm actually upset by the fact that the Boundary Commission have driven a coach and horses through the identity of Lake. The new guidelines actually put Lake stores in Sandown. It puts Lake Railway Station in Sandown. It even puts Lake Beach in Sandown. In fact, with Lake North and Lake South, it means that Lake doesn't even have a cliff, because part of it ends up in Shanklin and part of it ends up in Sandown. Talk about recognising local identity. As a Lakeite, I'm offended, frankly. That's the community which I stood for the first time last year, which I live in and I love. And this doesn't recognise Lake, and it pays no attention to the local feeling of the local community. And I'm very disappointed. I agree entirely with Councillor Brodie that we mustn't raise a white flag over this and we should fight it. Thank you.
Councillor Fuller.
I don't think I've got anything else to add. I'm just sort of like giving up the will to live at the moment. Thank you.
Councillor Nicholson has jumped in then.
Thank you. My ward, Northwood and Cow South, is one of the only wards that remains untouched, but nevertheless, am I the only councillor to see this as smacking of a great arrogance of we know best and total disregard for the tremendous work that Councillor Whitehouse and Clive Joynes put into their submission? And one comment I would make is, as the chairman of the campaign for Real Ale, I do know when somebody's had a bit of a drink. And to me, whoever drew up this map had certainly had one or two, because that's what it looks like.
Councillor Devshire.
I'm not going to dwell on the points that have been raised. I think they're all very good points. I will just challenge Councillor Lilly. You can't have your cake and eat it. I actually find when you make reference to Apley and you had the guts to go on the website, it means a lot of councillors here. A number of councillors have different ways of dealing with issues, and it doesn't mean they haven't got the guts. I think you should apologise for that remark. Councillors deal with things in different ways.
I accept that and I apologise.
Okay, Councillor Whitehouse, would you like to sum up, because then I'm moving to the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. It is certainly the case that the recommendations that come out of the review have made some fundamental decisions that were unwelcome, but which I doubt for 1 minute they will reconsider. That is, the move to go to 39 members instead of 40 in order to ensure that the arithmetic works. They've abandoned all pretense of community identity protection in some areas, even when in our submission we cited their previous report in 2009 as using community identity as the reason to reject the then council's proposals. We have a long tradition of failing to influence the Boundary Commission, by the way. They've also accepted our argument that we don't like two-member wards and went with our proposal to get rid of the one that we had and instead created a new one somewhere else just to rub salt into the wounds. The coast ward, I have to say, is a tad unusual. I'm sure it can be represented that way, but it is very difficult. I would say that the only scope for changes now are minor tinkering at local level and names of wards where we think there is a historical justification. I certainly accept the argument that Councillor Brodie and Councillor Nicholson and others have said that we shouldn't just roll over without making our points, and I will be working with Mr. Joines in particular to work up such a submission. But by way of expectation management, I don't hold out much hope for fundamental change. Again, in response to a number of remarks, particularly Councillor Brodie's, much as I would love it to be otherwise, I think there's a snowball in hell's chance of Parliament agreeing to move from 650 to 600 constituencies, because it would more than a tad upset the Labour Party at the moment, and it would be hard for Miss May to get her arithmetic together and get it through the House of Lords, even if she could get it through the House of Commons. Councillor Medland, demonstrating his learning and local history knowledge, for which he's renowned as a columnist in a number of island publications. The guidelines from the Commission in advance published on how to make your case do accept that historical community identity is of no interest to them whatsoever. It is only current community identity in which they're interested. But Councillor Baker-Smith also raised the parliamentary issue, and I just refer to my marks earlier. Councillor Reg Barry says, don't obsess with the detail in essential. Yes, voters will know where they need to go and vote. That will be made quite clear by our electoral team here. It will mean, if there aren't any tinkering changes, some administrative challenges for the reasons that a number of people have said, but I'm absolutely confident that people will have the right polling cards and go to the right stations when the elections next come around. Councillor Andre's challenge as to how many hours it took to do this, well, I've been really impressed by the professionalism and speed with which the team worked, and I'm sure the Director of Resources will be able to write to Councillor Andre and respond to that particular question. I hear Councillor Outlaw's outrage at the besmirching of the identity of Lake. That is something we can certainly address in our submission, and I look forward to tomorrow's evening's discussion at 6 o'clock to go into more detail.
Councillor Hutchinson, do you wish to add anything, or can we move to the vote, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to thank members for their comments. We look forward to putting together a submission to address some of the wrongs. Personally, I speak from liking one thing about the issues the Boundary Commission put forward, in that my ward will no longer be called West White, so people won't think I do the whole of West White. And I would also like to put forward a change so that Yarmouth is actually called Yarmouth and not Freshwater.
Right, we're moving to the vote then, please. All those in favour, please show. Anyone against? Any abstentions? That motion's carried. Right, moving on to the next one, Councillor Barry Abraham. Oh.
Chair, sorry, I just need some clarification. I'm not actually sure what the motion is and what the amendments are here. If I refer to the agenda, it seems to me that the entire block first paragraph is commentary and that the actual proposed motion is the second paragraph that begins in capital letters that. If you read the gist of it, you will see what I mean. We then move on to Councillor Lilly's amendment, the one with all the underlinings and bold text. He then seeks to amend the preamble from Councillor Abraham and also seeks to amend the motion, as I understand it, from Councillor Abraham. We then move on to sheet 3 from Councillor Stevens, an amendment which seems to me to be an amendment to the preamble. So, if I'm confused, I suggest that other members are either confused or don't care. Thank you. I'd like some guidance.
Councillor Stewart would like to give you guidance.
No, I actually echo and support what Councillor Brodie is saying. I'm going to take a different tack on this. I think that Councillor Stevens' amendment is actually deflecting us away from the purpose of this motion. And Councillor Brodie is absolutely right. I read the paragraph that's in the italics of Councillor Abraham's narrative and motion, that to be the motion. Councillor Lilly's, whilst I'm sure best intention, seems to be a play on the same words, and that's why I should be encouraging myself and other members to stick with the motion that Councillor Abraham has put so that we give a very clear and unambiguous message to government. So, making myself clear, and I do agree with Councillor Brodie, I think if we're not careful, what was intended to be a really positive, clear message could get lost in all this noise that's going on. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Abraham, I think what we're talking to now is the original one, which is the point 3.
Yes.
As I understand it.
Yeah. I think the words outlined by Councillor Brodie.
Yeah. Go on then.
With 3 seconds.
Chairman. Do, and we've done as a cabinet, is to try and bring this to the full council, for the full council actually to make the decision rather than making a delegated decision or going through the cabinet, because it is such a big issue on the island. And I tried to set it out in context, which is what the first paragraph actually relates to, and it does make the point that this does not relate to fracking. And you are quite right that the from that is my motion to the full council. The government are trying to change the policies that are in place and work in a tried and tested way. I believe that there should be no watering down of our ability to make the decisions on the island for how we give permission or withhold it, and I would ask members to support it. On the wider issue that Councillor oh dear, sorry, I'm getting late and my brain's going, that Councillor Stevens has put down, actually there was a motion passed by this authority back in January 2016 that covered a lot of the things that he's actually talked about. So I hope that members can actually stick with this motion that I put forward tonight and send, as the leader has said, a clear and unambiguous motion to government that we actually oppose what they're proposing to do.
I have to say, Councillor Brodie, I'm as confused as you are, because it's the first I've seen this on the table tonight. So,
all I'm asking is, as far as I'm concerned, Councillor Stevens' amendment isn't an amendment because it doesn't seek to amend the motion.
So I'm going to allow Councillor Stevens to come in and hopefully clarify.
Thank you, Chair. The preamble, which is part of Councillor Barry Abraham's motion, is with the dates for the formal comments by the 25th to government. The amendment to the italic written page, I've got a page on it, but under Councillor Barry Abraham, that the Council notes that the Government's proposals in relation to permitted development rights for shale gas exploration, this Council wishes to raise objections to the proposals. Great. And would wish to retain the ability for the Minerals Planning Authority to determine proposals for shale gas exploration. To add, further to potentially strengthen the ability of the island to protect its communities and geology, in particular against potentially damaging industrial processes. This council should consider making representations to the current Glover review, which is looking, amongst other things, at the potential extension of the boundaries of areas of outstanding natural beauty, given that in such areas there is restricted potential for activities such as fracking and shale gas exploration to take place. There's an amendment to the initial proposal from a motion from Councillor Abraham. I can't see the problem other than at the top, and we can all be blinkered with it and say, oh, the motion as it was typed up has actually said that it goes on to the preamble of Councillor Barry Abraham. So I hope by reading that through, it's given you clarity on what the amendment is. Thank you.
Chair, could I make a point of order? Because I'm sorry, Chair, but I would like to make a point of order, and it is that I met with the Chief Executive and I have corresponded with the monitoring officer in advance about items that are allowed onto the agenda under the guise of motions which are not motions. There is no provision in our Constitution whatsoever to have the preamble and the wheretofores and all that guff that goes before the motion. And therefore it shouldn't have been even on the agenda in the first place. It should be a short, focused motion, not an essay followed by a motion.
Can I just clarify, members? I think what Councillor Abraham said when he was explaining his motion, that yes, there is a preamble that sets the context, but the motion that he puts before you is the wording that's in the italics on the agenda that starts with that. The two bits of paper that you have with proposed amendments haven't yet been put. So what we should do is look for a seconder to the motion that's been put, and then if somebody wants to put an amendment, they put the amendment and we deal with that. But it needs to be an amendment to those words in italics that start with that to the council. And then we move forward with any amendments that come forward. These are just here for members' ease of reference, because particularly this one is quite a complicated amendment.
Chair, I'll second the motion and reserve.
What I'm concerned about, I accept what Ian Stevens has said about what he's tried. I mean, it's just the way he's done it, but, you know, that's by the by. What I'm concerned about is that the monitoring officer who sets this agenda with you, Chair, and whomever, I'm not involved in it, has now set a precedent that you can give a preamble to a motion. That is going to allow somebody who likes to use words like Councillor Lilly to stick in 6 pages of preamble before his motion in the future. And I tell you, I'll give you some, you know, a socialist lecture on everything. Now, if we're going to do that, that's going to bring this council in a major disrepute. And I think we should instruct officers that in future, motions are motions. We don't want preamble because it just confuses the more ignorant amongst us. Thank you.
I absolutely agree with you about the preamble, and that has been agreed. Yeah, not to, I mean, honestly, this is the first I've seen of this. Thank you. So we've got a seconder for right, so we're dealing with the original motion, and we've got a seconder, which is Councillor Dave Stewart. Okay, so did anyone wish to speak to that? Councillor Lilly.
So I'm getting confused. I haven't got the years of experience of being a councillor as Councillor Brodie. Do you want me to put forward my amendment? I wish to put forward my amendment as it says that the council notes that the government's proposal in relation to permitted development rights for shale gas exploration, I wish to add the words, and to bring the production phase of fracking under nationally significant infrastructure projects, bracket NSP. This council wishes to raise objections to the proposal and wish to retain the ability for the Minerals Planning Authority to determine, in my addition, all planning decisions at all stages for all types of oil and gas exploration, and then add the words, therefore this council instructs our planning officers to respond to the government's consultation accordingly by rejecting the changes proposed by PD and SIP as inappropriate, and with a view that local plans, local planning and local democratic decisions should retain control of all local mineral and fossil fuel development. I think it's quite clear. It's about the island absolutely being in control of its resources.
On a point of order, Madam Chairman, such an amendment would be unconstitutional because the Constitution is quite clear that the lead member makes these decisions, not officers.
Councillor Lilly, looking at the wording of your amendment, as currently worded, I would agree with Councillor Whitehouse that it isn't in accordance with our Constitution. What the wording would need to refer to is, rather than the council instructs our planning officers, it would need to say this council requests the cabinet member. But that's a matter for you, whether or not you wish to ask for that.
I'm happy to change, I accept that particular point and actually change the wording to be a cabinet member. Yeah.
Okay, so that motion's been put out. Is there a seconder for that motion?
Sorry,
Councillor Andre.
Requests as instructs.
Yeah, request the cabinet member, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Andre, you seconded. All those wishing to speak? Councillor Medland.
Yep. Just like to say, I think this is a big improvement because this whole thing in the preamble about the this isn't okay. There is a difference between conventional drilling and fracking. It's extremely difficult. I've been looking at this issue for some years now to understand what on earth the definition of fracking is. And I think we must be much wider about this. We must be clear that we want to keep all oil and gas drilling applications under our own authorities control in terms of planning as a mineral authority, because it's very difficult to know. Even if a company says it's doing a certain kind of, and there are, I think, 3 different definitions of fracking at the moment used by the government, you can't really tell what they're up to once they're working underground. And we know from past experience that oil drillers have actually broken the rules of their planning applications anyway. So I think it's far more sensible to have a blanket statement that we are in favour of keeping all oil and gas drilling applications within the control of the mineral authority, of this authority. Thank you.
Councillor Stevens is next.
Thank you, Chair. I'm still going to go forward with my amendment, but what I want to say about this is that we're all very concerned.
Sorry. No, because we're on Michael Lilly's amendment. Would you speak to Michael Lilly's amendment, please?
Thank you. Right.
To be honest, I thought that I haven't been given time to actually do that. I was only actually agreeing, so I do like to have the right to speak to my amendment.
Right, I think that the objective tonight is that brilliant that Councillor Abraham's brought this before us in the chamber. Great that we can all back a movement to actually stamp our local interest and make sure that the Isle of Wight is shale gas exploration free as best we can. I think that what we need to do is to beef it up and give it full backing. So I'm totally with Councillor Abraham, and indeed the amendment by Councillor Michael Lilly. Not going to dwell too much on it. I think that says enough, that we're all in here for the same reason, I feel sure. The Isle of Wight first and foremost. Thank you.
Councillor Abraham.
Thank you, Chairman. I apologise for causing the confusion. When I sent it in to officers, I did expect it really to have been looked at and put in a correct fashion. This authority, which I wasn't a member of in 2016, did pass a motion on fracking, and that motion is still in place. Everything that you are proposed tonight is already in place. We do not need to go over that old ground again. What we need to do is to make a comment to the proposal that the government has placed before us of whether we accept it or not. I am saying to you, as the full council, we should make the decision to object to it. That's it. That's all we need to do. We don't need to go into any other business on it at all, because at this present state, the government are not consulting on that. All they are consulting on is whether they should take away or give permitted rights to people to develop. That's all what they're doing. We need to make a comment, no, we don't agree with that, as all councils across the country are actually doing. And it will give them the power to be able to go to government and say, the councils across this country do not accept that. If we try and water that down, I think we start to corrupt the message.
Councillor Andre, then Councillor Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say, I do disagree with Councillor Abrahams when he says that that we don't need to be more specific with this, because I think the devil is in the detail. And I thank Councillor Lilly for actually bringing this amendment forward in terms of highlighting that if the government are successful in bringing this under the NSIP, then that will take the decisions away from the island, and I think that is a significant fact that I think should be brought to this council, and I thank Councillor Lilly for bringing this amendment forward, and that's why I was happy to second it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think it might be helpful if some of the members opposite actually read the motion, because it is absolutely clear that it says, and I read it for those who've struggled, this council wishes to raise objections to the proposals and would wish to retain the ability for the Minerals Planning Authority, that's this council, to determine proposals for shale gas exploration. It's clear, it's focused, it's concise, it does what it says on the tin. This reams of amendments from Councillor Lilly risk blunting that message, confusing that message, distorting that message, and laying the island open to fracking.
Right, okay.
No, I'm allowed to speak. I would urge Councillor Lilly, if he really wants to stop fracking on the island, as the Conservative group do unanimously on this side of the chamber, I would urge him, as somebody who knows how consultation responses are read by civil servants over 38 years in politics, to withdraw his silly motion, because it is going to confuse the government as to what this council actually thinks, and that therefore the amendment should not go through. We'll certainly be voting against it on this side.
Chair, I want to propose, in relation to this amendment, we move to the vote, and I propose that we do the same for Councillor Steve.
Okay, we're moving to the vote. If everyone, yeah, I mean, have we got a unanimous there? Well, actually, I'm quite happy that we've discussed this. Okay, enough. So we're moving to the amendment from Councillor Lilly. All those in favour of the amendment, please. It's in my...
Procedurally, it's a...
Okay, they're okay. Changed again. Okay, we'll move. So we've asked to be moved to the vote. All those in favour?
Okay.
God.
Point of order, please.
You know, I'm getting really quite fed up now.
I'm feeling really sorry for you because you're not getting good advice here. Michael hasn't even had the opportunity to move his amendment. You've been advised to allow other people in ahead of him. We're now going to be moving on to a vote when we haven't heard from the person who's proposed it. Now, whether you think it's a load of rubbish or not, Michael should have the right in this chamber to move his amendment. And Laura, if you want advice in future, I'm always happy to help. Thank you.
He did, you did, well, I mean, my recollection was that you did.
I was actually agreeing to the change of the wording, and I didn't have the opportunity to actually speak on my amendment.
Chair, can I first of all acknowledge my understanding is that Councillor Lilly did not get the opportunity to speak to his amendment, but I suspect the amount of conversation and reading that's taken place, we understand where he's coming from. It's probably quite clear to him where the direction of travel is on his amendment, and in order to be professional and effective in the circumstances, if Councillor Lilly is happy to accept that we've accepted his amendment being put, but that we would now like to go to the vote on it, because I suspect whatever he says may or may not influence the vote. But I'm acknowledging that you haven't had the chance to speak, and I think there's a fair point made.
Okay, right, okay, so the girls here have told me we're going to allow you to speak, okay?
Thank you. Firstly, I would like to thank Councillor Abrahams for bringing this forward, and to thank him for responding to the Policy and Scrutiny Committee of Regeneration, Planning and Housing Environment, which actually did on the 26th of July put forward concerns about this that were actually voted by members, and is actually in the scrutiny minutes saying that could he look at this and put forward. So I wish to thank him in responding. It's proved that scrutiny is improved and is actually working well, because he's actually responded to that, and I'm sure that that would come from the chair of that committee, Councillor Stevens, within that, and that there is a record of that. So we have gone through a process. My amendment to actually add words has been done is to actually strengthen, not confuse. And my particular point is, this is not about, yes, it's not about non-hydraulic fracking, shale gas exploration, but it is likely to be the first step towards fracking under this new regime. Gas shale exploration can involve a high level of negative environmental impact, including a rig, storage and transport fluids, flaring and a substantial level of HGV movements. It can involve impacts to local transport, air and water quality and industrialisation of the countryside. My actual adding was to strengthen, not confuse, and I don't think it does, is to actually make sure that we are covered, right? Because there are two consultations that are going on at the moment that the government are looking at, and I felt that we needed to strengthen Councillor Abraham so that we're actually covered on all areas, because the way that the wording is in the consultation, it can be or could be interpreted in the future to actually open us up. And that's why I particularly wanted to strengthen this, and also to make it very, very clear that as an island, right, you know, we cannot afford to get this wrong at all. We are different from other areas of the UK because we're surrounded by water, and any kind of drilling or any use of chemicals will come through our environmental infrastructure, and actually really we could be a Chibonal of environmentally. So we have to get this right, and my wording was to actually emphasise that. So I pushed forward and pushed forward my motion. Thank you.
Okay, we allowed you to speak, Councillor Lilly, as we promised. We're now moving to the vote, which was proposed and seconded. So we're moving to the vote on your amendment. All those in favour of the amendment, please. Those against? Councillor Whitehouse. Okay, that motion is defeated. Was there any abstentions? No. That amendment has fallen. Councillor Stevens, are you putting forward your motion next?
I am, yes.
Sorry.
Most definitely. I'll get my specs out again. And my amendment is to add on to the foot of Councillor Abraham's, further to potentially strengthen the ability of the island to protect its communities and geology, in particular against potentially damaging industrial processes. This council should consider making representations to the current Glover review, which is looking, amongst other things, at the potential extensions of the boundaries of areas of natural beauty, given that in such areas there is restricted potential for activities such as fracking and shale gas exploration to take place. And I suggest that we put that in prior to the closing date of the 25th of October, which seems to be missing from Councillor Abraham's motion.
Yeah. Do we have a seconder, please?
I'm ready to speak on it if you wish.
Anyone wishing to speak to the amendment? Councillor Ian, Stephen.
Thank you. Councillor Ian's here. I'd like to say that, you know, there is a current government review going on, the Glover review, which is looking at AONB boundaries. Bearing in mind that 50% of this island is AONB, it would seem a possible way that we should take forward and put representation of the Glover review and also to the government, so that we have joined up thinking, not silo representation. Make sure that we're firing on all cylinders, because this, as has been said in the previous debate, this is very, very important to our island. We need to get it right. Remember that fracking cannot take place on AONB land. And what we need to do is make sure that the government knows that we mean business. What I would also say is that always be prepared for knockbacks with the planning inspectorate, etc., if we just stick with one avenue. We've got a strong argument with regard to the review, because they're looking at the AONB boundary reviews, and we've got slight or strangely drawn areas around Godtill, Kelbourne and Arraton, and some of those areas could actually be brought in to AONB and lessen the opportunity by possible development of fracking or applications for fracking. I am trying to support the motion by Councillor Abraham to make this a more rounded and voluble support. And I think that, you know, taking the ONB and indeed, you know, Natural England and others, and indeed our residents, who would, I would think, quite value the opportunity to have us firing on all cylinders instead of thinking that the Isle of Wight Council can solve everything. We can do our utmost, but we need that little bit of help from other outside experts, because we've got a lot of people on this island who are experts, and they can assist us in making these cases to central government and making the process that much more formidable. Thank you.
Councillor Lilly, you were next to speak.
I wish to support this amendment, because it does what Councillor Stevenson says, is it just re-emphasises strongly that we not only have 50% of the island being an AOB area, we're also, I think at the last council meeting, very much supported the bid for being an island biosphere under UNESCO. so that we actually cover the whole island environmentally, and that we cannot afford any kind of oil or gas exploration on our small island, because it would actually pollute into our streams, our rivers, and then into the sea, and it would actually destroy the uniqueness of this area. We know that our learned MP wishes actually for us to become a national park, which actually I also support, and therefore, again, we cannot afford that. We need to have all the mechanisms, right? And we need to put forward to the government a very, very strong case. So I urge you to actually put forward this one, because once a site has permitted development, and this is all about permitted development and extending, not someone's extending someone's house, actually extending, using inappropriately permitted development for shale gas exploration, the principle is established, and it will be much easier for operators to move through appraisal and production consenting, and environmental impacts of the whole process need to be assessed at the earliest possible stage. And it just goes totally against all the other motions that we've had and support and our environmental policy within this. So I urge you to support this amendment.
Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to highlight one particular... Hello? Yeah. Thank you. Element that Councillor Lilly said in respect of national parks. We have to be very, very careful, because in terms of a national park, it's my understanding that we wouldn't qualify for the island as a whole. So we would inevitably go in with another national park, and we would actually lose our planning, and we would effectively just become an authority that organises our health and social care. So we do have to be very, very careful about the issue of national parks. Having said that, this amendment that's been put forward, we do have to operate within the planning system, and we can't predetermine applications by saying shale gas and fracking applications will be rejected, because if we do, this will send any such applications straight to the planning inspector. We therefore need to look to all those features that exist which could be employed to strengthen our position in respect of any applications of concern. And we do have a very strong argument with the Glover Review. As has already been alluded to, the current boundaries of the AONB area on the island are strangely drawn. And as a result of the Glover Review, if we do get those recommendations to extend AONB boundaries, that could have a significant effect on protecting this island against fracking. Therefore, I propose the amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Abraham.
Thank you, Chairman. I have spoken to the MP with regard to AONB that's come out of the Glover report, because actually I intend to seek an extension in my own ward to try and protect the coastline. The problem is, you can get AONB, you can stop drilling in AONB, but what you can't do is they can go down and across. They will get under it any way that they can. Don't think for one moment that AONB will stop any fracking on the Isle of Wight. I have mentioned before, and I don't know whether I'm saying it in French or some language that people don't understand, that in January 2016, and I'm not even sure whether Councillor Stevens was actually the leader of the council. I don't know. They sort of chopped and changed a bit around that time. And it was and one of the second amendment. Sorry. Well, no, definitely wasn't me. No, but one thing that I will read out is that the council recognises that there is widespread public concern that, over the use of unconventional oil and gas extraction through fracking in terms of its potential environmental effects and implications on climate change in relation to the eco-island policy pursued by this council since 2008. But also recognises that as a planning authority, the council is unable to express opposition to the principle of fracking, as this would suggest predetermination. I think Councillor Andre just made that very point. That was passed in 2016. The third is that the council notes for any application relating to the operations identified above to be successful on the Isle of Wight, it would be required to satisfy and not negatively impact upon all relevant policy requirements of the island plan, including not to be limited to tourism, environmental, renewables. It's already there. That is the point. What you are proposing as an amendment is already there. It's already in place. It's what you and your administration actually voted for. And we're not proposing to make any changes to that whatsoever. What we are proposing is just to make a simple statement to the government. We do not want we do not want to give exploration companies permitted rights to explore on the Isle of Wight. Any application that comes forward will be determined by the Mineral Authority of this council. That's all we need to say.
Yeah, well, we've still got another couple of questions to come, which is another half an hour, so and we've still got 5 people wishing to speak. Councillor Quirk.
The government's made very specific proposals in regard to removing the planning control on the island, or anywhere, and giving permitted development rights. They've opened a consultation, and what we have in the original proposal is a very strong statement that actually meets that need. As Councillor Andre said, if we start to predetermine our position on things, that undermines the planning authority's ability to make planning decisions. And by putting that particular addition to this amendment, that rather does suggest that we've actually predetermined our position. I will be voting for the original, but against the amendment.
Councillor Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chair. This proposed amendment and the comments that we've heard from Councillor Stevens and Councillor Andre would hint to me that some members are spending rather too much time listening to the failed former council leader, Councillor Bacon, who is now chairman of the AONB. I think it's reckless to be gambling with the island's right to determine its own mineral planning application rights, as this does. I also think it's reckless to be trying to bounce the council into changing AONB boundaries when we've had no presentations on it, we've had no discussion of it, we've had no assessment of its impact. This would water down the clarity of the motion that Councillor Abrams has brought forward. It would confuse people as to why we were talking about the AONB in the same breath when they're clearly distinct issues. And I would even argue that the amendment in the first place wasn't within the scope because it's dealing with a different issue altogether than that the one was put on the order paper. And I hope the monitoring officer and chair caught that because they're chatting to each other. So for all those reasons, I would say a vote for this motion is a vote to increase the likelihood of fracking being conducted on the island. I'm sure that's not what Councillor Stevens wants to achieve, and I would therefore urge him to withdraw it so that we don't have to waste any further time, but I'm quite sure that my colleagues on this side of the chamber defending the island's right to determine its own mineral planning applications will vote down this confusing nonsense.
Councillor Jones-Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. I will be brief, I'm sure you're pleased. Let's just be clear, this council has in the past been against fracking. We are still all united and we're against fracking on this island. We are all together behind the biosphere, so there's no argument there. But I have to say, you know, if Councillor Brodie is being confused by all this extra paperwork and words, then I agree with Councillor Whitehouse that I think a civil servant in Whitehall, being inundated with lots of thousands of objections and comments, will be confused as well. Let's be really clear and simple, and I'm going to get behind Councillor Abraham's motion.
Councillor Brading.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to talk on this motion, but having listened to what's been said, I thought I ought to. I hear what Councillor Stevens said, and I 100% agree. Government needs to know we mean business, not Conservatives. The whole island needs to mean business. Now, I'm not a fracking expert, I'm not a shale gas expert, but I've read up on it, I've read the paper. I have read the decision this council made long before I got anywhere near politics. I read the decision of 2016 about our fracking policy, and that stands. Nothing's changed on our policy for fracking, and my view matches what was the decision was made in 2016. So, to pick up on the AONB, lesson opportunity, yes, by expanding the areas, but it will condense the opportunity. Councillor Mosdale is very concerned that you increase AONB elsewhere, her ward, which could be the centre of most of it, will be lessened. So if they're going to do it, it will be in a smaller area on the island, rather than, you know, so AONB is great, widen the area is great, but it will lessen the opportunity where they could actually, if they ever did, do this drilling. But the main point is, we need to retain control of what we're doing. We need to send out a really simple, as Julie quite eloquently put, we need to send out a real simple, clear message to our government that we're dead against this. And as a council, we should all back Councillor Abraham's motion and just send a very clear, concise message to government that we do not agree with this. We want to keep control of our island, and that's what it's all about, really. Thank you.
Councillor Brodie.
Just a very quick point. I supported Councillor Lilly's amendment because, whilst I do have some reservations, because I remember the fracking debate back in January 2016, I know what the council's position is. He'd had the courtesy, at least, to circulate a complicated amendment. It's very complicated, and I think I understand where we are now, in advance, just as I did when I circulated an amendment about the boundary review. What I would make a plea to the Island Independent group on this council, and they are the largest opposition group, Ian, is that in future they shall respect and circulate amendments well ahead of full council, so that we know what we're considering. This is not a two-line amendment, changing principle to principle or anything like that. This is a significant amendment, and I don't feel competent enough to vote in favour of it because of that. You're a group of 7 or 8 or whatever. There's an SRA for the group leader. Surely it's within your competence to get an amendment to us at least 24 hours beforehand, so as I can consider it. And now that's a plea, and I say that as I try to be friendly to the Isle of Wight Independent, but increasingly they appear as amateurish in this chamber. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Abraham, you have the right to sum up if you wish. If not, we're moving to the vote.
Just for clarity, this is Councillor Stevens' amendment, doesn't he sum up? No. No? Oh, right. Oh well, thank you. In that case, I will ask that we move to the vote.
So we're moving to the vote on the amendment. Okay? All those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? That motion fails. Sorry, I keep saying motion, sorry. I'm going to probably have to suspend standing orders. Oh, sorry, a vote on the motion before we move to the suspending of standing orders. Is everyone happy that we move to the vote on this one? Yes, we are? On the substantive motion. Right, all those in favour? Those against? Oh. Abstentions? None? Okay, thank you very much. That motion finally is carried. Right, we're moving on to item number 9, which is members' question time, which I'm hoping to try and get through so I don't have to amend standing orders. 2 questions. First one, Councillor Whitehouse.
Chair, I'd like to ask the leader of the Isle of Wight Council if he will make a statement on his vision for the future regeneration of the Newport Harbour District and for attracting investment and jobs to the Medina Valley, whether that vision will include the redevelopment of this shabby county hall site, and if he will identify the steps so far taken to deliver his objectives and the timelines he anticipates for future progress.
So I'd like to thank Councillor Whitehouse for his question, and prior to the meeting I thought carefully about my reply, which is some 2 pages long. However, sensing the mood of the chamber, I will concentrate on the key aspects. I think, and I'm going to summarise my summary and then leave it available for the press and anybody else who wants to read it. One of the key things, key visions for us at the moment is the regeneration of Newport Harbour and Newport. I am grateful to Newport Parish Council for their and Carisbrook after all this evening, I should correct, sorry Councillor Hobart, for their engagement with us on the whole picture around the development of Newport. And I also thank the officers for the work they've done, and I'll acknowledge in particular Chris Ashman for the wide-ranging consultation that's been taken on this. This is one of our key areas of development. I think all the councils should get behind this because we really do need to take this generation on board. You asked my vision. My vision is for the harbour to provide an enhanced civic and commercial focus for the Isle of Wight, with an arc of opportunity stretching up the western bank of the Medina, from the quayside through the college and hospital sites, connecting much needed new function with the former Camp Hill site. I think this really is a flagship opportunity for us. Cabinet agreed last week in the first of the crucial road improvements, which was the St Mary Roundabout and St George's Way, and that will now move forward. We've got continuous engagement with partners, and as Councillor Hutchinson reminded us, some very, very good presentations coming forward regarding the master plan. It's quite clear to the Cabinet that Newport and Carisbrook Parish Council are fully behind their community in this area, and so I'm very keen that we support that. Finally, I just want to take this one opportunity to acknowledge the drive, commitment and single-minded purpose of Councillor Whittle in moving forward the whole of the regeneration agenda. Many question his style. I love it, and I actually think that this island benefits from people like him who gets his hands dirty, understands the front end of regeneration, and is working with anybody and everybody who cares about our island. So with that, I'll give you full details in due course, Councillor Wells.
Second question from...
Supplementary.
Oh, sorry, you've got a supplement.
Will the Leader of the Council accept my thanks for that detailed answer, copies of which have been given to the responsible members of the press, and will be available for the Chairman of the Newport and Carisbrook Parish Council. Does he agree with me that his vision is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to transform the quality of life and life chances of the people of Newport and the whole Medina Valley, will he absolutely commit to driving this forward with the energy and determination that he has displayed so far, because it can really make a difference. After years of complaining that we can't make change to the better on the island, it's already happening.
Yes.
Thank you. Next question from Councillor Lilly.
As the 8th of September 2018 was the 3rd anniversary of outline planning permission for approximately 900 houses on land known as Pennyfeathers in Ryde East Ward, no application for full planning permission in regard to housing has been made as yet. Can the leader of the council confirm whether this development is ever going to happen?
Well, Councillor Lilly, thank you for your question. Whilst the Planning Committee resolved to approve the planning application for Pennyfeathers on the 8th of September 2015, the formal decision notice was not actually issued until the 1st of September 2017 due to the need to have a Section 106 legal agreement in place with the developer to secure the delivery of affordable housing, highway improvements and community benefits. As such, the consent will not lapse until the 1st of September 2020. But discussions continue with developers of housing sites in the wider Ryde East area to see how they can be unlocked and brought forward. Ultimately, the decision to progress any schemes rests with the landowner. And I think your question and my response highlights once again the frustration that I know many islanders have, that when these development proposals come forward, receive the planning permission, and then seem to just sit there, as some might describe as land grabbing or whatever. It does us no favours. We desperately need development. We desperately need affordable housing. And I think I would like to ask all members in this chamber on these issues to work together and get our housing where it needs to be. So I thank you for your question, and I hope my answer satisfies you.
Is there a supplementary?
My supplementary question is Pennyfeathers has in its design and outline plan a road which actually crosses from Brading to Smallbrook Lane. Other developments, including the Isle of Wight Council's own Nicholson Road site, which is to be an industrial development and create jobs, needed jobs in the area, cannot go ahead unless the road infrastructure is actually sorted out. And if there is a delay in Pennyfeathers, it's going to actually affect the Isle of Wight Council in unlocking its land in Nicholson Road. What are you actually doing, the council, about getting a joined up road infrastructure in that part of Ryde?
So we've taken a very robust approach as a council. Councillor Brodie, I'm sure, will echo that at times we've had some challenges with certain developers in Newport who decided that they couldn't get a road completed that we desperately needed, and that's now come forward and been done. I'm also going to get some lighting for Councillor Brodie before I get up that other road, which I did promise him we will look at. But I think in terms of Ryde and the development there, I'll ask Councillor Whittle just to give you a bit of an insight into what's being played out there.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Good evening. Currently, our officers are talking with Pennyfeathers about trying to find ways to bring funding in to enable them to put in the highways infrastructure that is needed within that area. And if we can do that, we can unlock the other sites. Negotiations are ongoing.
That's it, everybody. We've done it just in time without having to move standing orders. Thank you very much. Good evening.